Part of Justin Trudeau's list of priorities for the new parliament is to give more responsibility, and you better believe that also means more money to CBC. Laid out in Justin Trudeau's mandate letter to the new Heritage Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, is a line that calls on Minister Guilbeault to, quote, strengthen the regional mandate of CBC Radio-Canada to broadcast more local news and require CBC Radio-Canada to open up its digital platform. Now, whenever the government says it's to strengthen something, and we see this in other parts of the Heritage mandate letter, it ultimately means to give it more money. Strengthen means provide more funding to this. CBC already gets upwards of $1.3 billion a year. We know the government has also put about $600 million to bankrolling other aspects of the news and journalism sectors in Canada. And now CBC is supposed to apparently pick up the slack and be the larger local news provider. An iPolitics piece picked up on this, and in it quoted Minister Guilbeault as saying that he's yet to have a conversation with CBC, but would ensure they receive adequate funding for any new mandates. The article also points out that Minister Guilbeault plans to produce more regional content by hiring more people, opening more offices, or potentially having CBC partnerships with existing media. Now, the idea that CBC can be on the front lines of the local news battle is a big concern here. The CBC mandate is supposed to be one that is delivering services that the private sector cannot do. CBC has a track record of going into markets that already have successful private sector operations and competing with them. This happened in my own city in London, Ontario. And the idea that CBC would become a local voice didn't end up happening because they filled the airwaves with people that were imported from other parts of the country. And we see this happen for CBC time and time again. The CBC is not interested in doing the work that is less sexy, that's not competing with the private sector, like focusing on communities that don't have private journalism enterprises. And one of the interesting things that Minister Guilbeault said in this iPolitics piece is that CBC does not compete with private sector business models. That's just not true. If it were true, CBC wouldn't be broadcasting the Olympics, for example, or other reruns of sitcoms and movies and other things that private sector media do focus on and do deliver, and oftentimes do with a much smaller budget than CBC is given, thanks to the federal government. So let's dispense with this notion that CBC is a savior when it arrives in communities. Oftentimes, it's hurting the local companies that are trying to do the heavy lifting on this. And if we are going to have CBC moving forward, we either have to look at a model where its funding comes privately or a model where its content is accessible publicly to all other companies. Make it more like a wire service rather than a Goliath of a competitor to them. But the reason I find this so dangerous is that we've already seen Justin Trudeau promise time and time again that he will be a friend of the CBC, even jokingly during the campaign when he handed a platter of poutine over to a CBC reporter and said the Liberals will always look out for CBC. Well, the reality is they're looking out for CBC, and that means that CBC is in many respects beholden to the government. Beholden to the government, who is assuring its longevity, even at the expense of taxpayers. For True North, I'm Andrew Lawton.